Chair for the session, let's talk defects. Road safety is a very broad and all-encompassing statement. There are many facets to road safety: weather, traffic, road design, the maintenance of those roads. Maybe we need a defect system for roads. There's other road users, and then there's vehicle roadworthiness. Today we have a panel who will discuss some of the known issues relating to defects. And whilst being mindful that for industry there are many issues around roadworthiness that require revision and or wholesale change. Hopefully, much will be improved resulting from the HVNL review. Today our panel consists of Paul Fellows. Paul, together with his wife Jenny, owns and operates a small family-owned bulk transport and grain storage business in Deniliquin, New South Wales. He has been involved in road transport for over 40 years as a driver, a mechanic, a supervisor and a small fleet owner. Paul is currently Joint Deputy Chair of TruckSafe and a member of the Nat Road Board. He is interested in promoting a safe, sustainable, professional industry. Our second panellist is Dr. Jeff Potter, who is Principal Safety Policy Advisor at the National Transport Commission. He has over 20 years' experience in developing and implementing road safety policy and safety programs relating to driver behaviour, particularly in heavy vehicle safety, fatigue management, speed countermeasures, and drink and drug driving. In his current position, he is involved in the development of a safety policy and regulatory reform for road transport and in the review of the Heavy Vehicle National Law. Jeff is chair of the Victorian chapter of the Australasian College of Road Safety and a member of the International Council for Alcohol, Drugs and Traffic Safety. Over the past 30 years, much has changed in road transport industry. I recall when first scheduling an electronic engine prime mover into road train operations. Other operators had thought we'd gone mad, but ultimately there were no surprises. Now it's the norm. Industry moved forward with technology. Pushing the boundaries can be a challenge, and often it's a very fine line between the leading edge and the bleeding edge. V-doubles were rare, now they're the norm. Industry moved forward with technology, and Australia benefited from the productivity and improvements. Everyone carried spare tyres because they needed them. Tyre technology has improved considerably, and now many interstate operators do not even carry spares. Industry moved forward with technology. Can we say the same about road safety and roadworthiness? Definitely. Vast improvements over the years. So what really constitutes a defective vehicle, and specifically a vehicle defect? If you want 10 opinions, ask 5 people, as almost certainly they'll each give you a two-way bet. There is much in the HVNL review, and the ATA, in canvassing membership, identified numerous concerns about not only the interpretations, but also the processes. So what is a vehicle defect? In referencing the NHVR's Heavy Vehicle Defects Compliance and Enforcement Bulletin, it describes what is a defective heavy vehicle as being a heavy vehicle that does not comply with the heavy vehicle standards, or does not perform its intended function, or has deteriorated to an extent that it cannot be reasonably relied on to perform its intended function. Defect notices and reforming the Heavy Vehicle National Law. In June 2020, the National Transport Commission released a consultation regulation impact statement with proposals for changing the Heavy Vehicle National Law. This includes option 11.1, a proposal for a standardised maintenance and roadworthiness assessment. This would have 3 key features: recognition of the National Heavy Vehicle Inspection Manual in the HVNL to increase the consistency in roadside inspection of vehicles, amendments of the HVNL to require the use of self-clearing defects for non-safety cases. Where a defect does relate to safety, then an inspection of a defect clearance would only be required to check if the identified defect had been rectified, rather than a full inspection. The ATA supports this reform, which delivers on ATA reform priorities to incorporate the HVIM under the HVNL and use self-clearing defects for non-safety cases. Incorporating the NHVIM in law would remove ambiguity and could increase consistency in enforcement, although the ATA recommends that it would need to be reviewed before being recognised under the law. Additionally, the ATA recommend changes to the HVNL which would create a review mechanism to enable NHVR to review and overturn defects that may have been issued in error or are inconsistent with NHVIM, establish a requirement for mutual recognition of roadworthiness inspections for registration and defects clearance by jurisdictions, establish a requirement for full vehicle inspections to reset the clock on scheduled inspections, and create an option for electronic notification and processing of defect notices. I'd now like to introduce to you Dr. Jeff Potter from the NTC, who will give us a brief introductory presentation. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks to the ATA for the invitation to come along and participate today. As Bob said, I've been involved over the past 18 months with the review of the Heavy Vehicle National Law, which has really gone back to first principles to see what is it that we need to regulate and how can we regulate it most effectively to ensure that the industry is both safe and productive going into the future. A lot of the key points Bob has just summarised for you. Some of them are leftovers from the review into heavy vehicle roadworthiness that we conducted back in 2015, which introduced some elements into the national law, such as the self-clearing defect as an option for vehicles that were found to not comply with the standards but were not unsafe, to streamline the process of getting the vehicle fixed and back on the road as quickly as possible. The changes that we're canvassing in the consultation RIS that was out for comment are moving that from being something that can be issued if the defect is ruled not to be a safety-related one to one that will be issued. It is to be the option when there is a non-compliance with the standards that doesn't relate to safety. The other key change that comes along with that is that recognition of the Heavy Vehicle Inspection Manual. The inspection manual has been very widely accepted since it was first introduced and is now being used through all the states of Australia. And it has the advantage that the straight reading of the law doesn't, of providing examples of what does and does not meet the standards and the way in which you can test the vehicle to determine it. So recognising the law means that that there is more objectivity in that differentiation between whether or not a vehicle or vehicle component is meeting the standards and should or should not be determined to be defective. As Bob says, and as a number of submissions that have come in have quite rightly pointed out, the inspection manual wasn't designed to be used at the roadside. So when it's recognised in the law, if that is the ultimate decision that ministers make for the new law, then there will need to be changes made to it to adapt to a wider application. The other change that we're canvassing in that regulatory impact statement was around the inspection to clear a defect to only need to inspect the defective component. So if you've been defected because your brake lights don't work, that doesn't require putting the vehicle over a pit and a brake tester for a full evaluation. That's not to say you can't do that. And it's certainly not to say that if you're being inspected to make sure that your headlights work, that the mechanic may notice that the wheel nuts are missing or loose and identify a safety feature that needs to be rectified apart from the one that was defected. But it does mean that the minimum to get the defect cleared is no longer a full vehicle inspection. So far, we've had a number of submissions come in about the regulatory impact statement with additional suggestions around appeals processes for defects and around recognition of an inspection that is cleared a defect to be recognised in lieu of annual re-registration inspection. These are certainly things we're going to consider in putting together the final recommendations of Co-op Ministers next year, as indeed will be anything new and relevant that comes out of this session. So with that, I will finish up and hand back to Bob.
Thanks, Jeff. It's your turn now, Paul, so I'd like to introduce Paul Fellows, and the floor is yours. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Bob. Well, good afternoon. Defects. When I was asked to be on today's panel, I had to really think about my own experience with defects. And to be honest, we really haven't had that many to contend with over the years. It's usually the stone chip on the windscreen. But mostly, a quiet word from the RMS, which has always been great, local guys here, regarding a faded rear marker or a number plate. And really, this got me thinking, and I thought, well, I'll contact some operators that I know, usually in each state, just to get a bit of a broad view of what's actually going on. I also contacted some of the local enforcement agencies as well to gain a perspective from their point of view. And look, after these discussions, at the end of the day, I believe we're all on the same page. We want to operate safely and have our guys and girls come home safely after performing their duties. And, we also have a responsibility for safety for other road users as well, and the community at large. I'd like to share some feedback from these discussions. Well, basically, what I've found is it all revolves around two words subjective and objective. Now, subjective is defined in the dictionary as a decision based on or influenced by personal feelings, biased tastes, or opinions. Objective is defined as a decision not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing of facts, i.e. to act impartially. I'll give you a couple of examples from the operators I've spoken to of some subjective decisions that I'm sure all operators will be able to relate to. We've got a guy in Western Australia, really good operator, smart guy, great equipment, does everything properly, and quite well known, and but he will remain anonymous. He was defected because his truck was deemed too noisy. Yet there was no equipment available to determine what that noise level was. That to me is ridiculous. Look, my own experience, small windscreen, small chip on the left-hand side of the windscreen, certainly not in the line of vision, but a guy that's having a bad day has decided to write us up for it. I've had some comments of some brand new trucks, first trip out and defected for AdBlue tampering. The computer in the truck has not been touched, yet they've been defected. Brand new trucks defected for speed limiter tampering. Quite an issue in South Australia, and I think Bob will touch on that later on. But brand new truck, an overzealous officer saying that the revolutions of the tyres are incorrect, issuing them with a defect. Truck goes back to the manufacturer. We need to get this fixed. Manufacturer says we can't change that because we will be breaking the law because the truck is in ADR 65 spec. Truck goes back out on the road, gets another defect, $750 each time. And again, given 24 hours to clear the defect. Nearly impossible to do, particularly in remote rural areas. Look, when it comes to objectivity, and I'm sure everyone would agree with me, there is no one is going to complain about a defect that is going to prevent an accident or a catastrophic incident, and a time frame in line with the seriousness, to fix the defect in line with the seriousness of the problem. It's also came to my attention that to be an objective as an enforcement officer, one must either be a mechanic or have a mechanical background. And I understand that the RMS, as their officers, have always been either mechanics or mechanical background. But worryingly, the NHVR are employing people with no mechanical background, and I think that needs to be addressed. How can someone with no mechanical background possibly be able to make an objective or accurate decision on a defective vehicle? Just common sense. Another operator from South Australia, good bloke, top of the tree, operators in truck safe, operating at the industry's highest standards. They've had issues with defects which have been cleared in other states, but there's been no communication between the states. Our guys go in to re-register the truck, and of course there's a defect on the truck and it can't be re-registered. And there's also, but the biggest problem is there's no way of determining what the defect was. Same thing with a driver. He gets the defect. He might be going on holidays the next day. He may lose employment. The defect doesn't get reported to the company. Again, they go in to re-register the truck. There's a outstanding defect. And again, no one can tell the operator what the defect is. Defects need to be reported to the company, not only to the driver. Another comment, we need a central database. This came from Tassie. And we need a central database where an operator can see if there are any outstanding defects and be able to access this to see if the defect has been cleared. Another comment from New South Wales, we need a disputation process and a time frame where a defect can be reviewed or appealed. Again, a proportion to the seriousness of the defect. Positive comment from South Australia, the NHVR, who have taken over the role over there, they are doing an incredibly good job. They rate them 99 out of 100, which is excellent. Their emphasis over there is on education, not giving fines, which I think is a very positive step. Personally, I've had a similar relationship with RMS in New South Wales. Another suggestion, the South Australia Police would do well to follow the lead of the NHVS. They're my colleagues' words, not mine. Interesting comment from a large Queensland operator. Again, very, very good business, long-term business, very successful. Again, another truck safe business. They've found that there's no training for mechanics. And what they're finding is that mechanics, apprentices and whatnot, are trained to repair items, but they're not actually trained to spot a defect. And it's something we need to discuss in the future training, that we need to be looking for defects instead of looking for something that's broken. Self-clearing defects has been a huge success from our guys in Tassie and South Australia and New South Wales. That's been a great success. Finally, let's think about objective defect enforcement from officers who are qualified to make an objective decision. And let's keep subjective emotion, bias and personal feelings out. There's no place for that in today's industry. And let's face it, what the country's gone through in the last 9 months or so, it's the transport industry it's been literally supporting and driving the economy. We need support, not harassment. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Well, to our audience, that's an introduction to some of the issues that we're facing in the arena of defects. We're going to move now to a bit of a panel Q&A format, but I'd just like to introduce a couple of other things for you to consider. Consider these examples. A faded number plate. Is it a defect or is it something else? Sun visor too shiny. Defect, something else. EBS not plugged into the lead trailer that doesn't have EBS but has an EBS through power supply, towing a non-ABS or EBS trailer. Defect or something else. And speed limiting. 11R tyre with tyre revolutions set at 311 revs per kilometre. Is that a defect or something else? I'm going to revisit those later, but I'd like you to just think about those. I'm now going to ask each of our panellists for their interpretations on 3 issues. Safety versus non-safety, a defect versus a vehicle standards non-compliance. Heavy vehicles are specialised machinery. Machines suffer wear and component fail. That's a fact, so we need to live with it. Maintenance records and preventive maintenance programs through a history base are designed to preempt replacement and minimise the failures, but not all component wear will constitute a safety defect. I'll go to you first, please, Jeff.
Look, thanks, Bob. Absolutely not any vehicle, once it comes off the production line, is immediately going to start to deteriorate, whether you're driving it around or whether just leaving it sitting stationary in a paddock. And deciding where on the continuum of wear from absolutely brand new through to decrepit and falling apart, you draw the line and say, here it is no longer complying and here it is no longer safe. As much as we try to make it objective, there will be qualified people who will look at it and have a different opinion of where that line should be. It's hard to be definitive, and I absolutely take Paul's point about the need to have some mechanical knowledge to make that assessment, which I don't have, not having any mechanical training in my background. But the important thing to me about the purpose of the regulation is that vehicles aren't allowed to be used on the road when they're in an unsafe condition. How you actually go to determine whether they're in an unsafe condition requires someone who knows the difference between safe and unsafe to be able to look at them and form that opinion.
Thanks, Jeff. And Paul?
Well, look, I'm a truck safe member, have been for 20 years. Part of in truck safe there is a table of wear content. So it's in black and white. You've got your plate steering and your plate. It's all listed. So it's not rocket science. So to me, it's about safety. And again, getting back to an incident, if it's going to cause an incident, it needs to be rectified. A shiny sun visor, don't know, a little bit too much armour oil on the sun visor. I can't say that is a safety problem. A bald steer tyre, yes, safety problem, needs to be addressed. I had one the other day. A guy's got 5 driving lights on his truck. That's a defect. You're only allowed 4, as I believe. Is that a safety issue? It's not going to me. It's not going to cause a catastrophic incident. So I think it really gets down to a mechanical issue, a mechanical failure.
Thanks, Paul. And one other thing,
Bob, if I can, I'm sorry, Bob, if I can just add to that, I think there's a really, really important point there. No doubt that a bald tyre on a steer steer axle is defective. Is it necessarily that a just as bald tyre that's on one of a trailer of a road train, so there's 93 good tyres and one bald one? Definitely the wheel defective. Is the vehicle unsafe? I would say probably not. But that's an area with how many then need to be bald before you say the vehicle's not going to be able to stop safely and call it an unsafe vehicle. Some countries, I know the US and Canada are too, have a very specific table of unroadworthiness, which calls out number of bald tyres as a proportion of number of axles and total number of wheels. So they would ground a vehicle with one bald tyre out of 4, but they wouldn't ground a vehicle with just one bald tyre out of 40, unless it was a steer axle tyre. So some of those, and they are judgment calls rather than absolutes, are part of the challenge of enforcing the black letter of the law in real life.
Look, bald tyre's a bald tyre. You know, woman was killed.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's bald, but is it unsafe?
It is unsafe. You know, a woman was killed on a regional road down here. Tyre blew on the trailer, and it was basically blew as the woman was going the opposite way, and created she had an accident. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care if it's on the steer, if it's on the drive, or it's on the try. You know, if it's bald. Yeah, okay, it's a fluke that it happened. And a bald tyre on the steer tyre, a failure on the steer is going to be a lot more catastrophic. But, hey, it can happen. And it happened to this woman.
Yeah. And look, the other thing about tyres is it's very clear in the NHVIM what a bald tyre is. You know, it's got to have more than, I think it's 1.6 mils over 75% of the width of the tyre and all the way around the tyre. So, you know, look, it's a good discussion. I've long held a view, and a view that's shared by many others, that the key components that should be in focus are those components that when all the others have failed, the vehicle can continue to be controlled and brought to a safe stop, even if that location isn't ideal. Now, I've got a list of 7 key factors that I rate as being highly important. Brakes, chassis and frame, couplings, fifth wheel, etc. You want it all to stay together. Load restraint, you don't want the load falling off. The steering's got to be good. The suspension needs to be good. And wheels, tyres and rims and wheel end also need to be good. An oil leak of, say, 1 drop every 2 minutes is hardly a safety issue. Should it be fixed? Definitely. So does the panel agree with these crude interpretations as to how we might move forward and separate safety versus non-safety issues? To you first, Paul.
Well, I agree with everything you said, Bob. Really don't have a lot to say about that. You know, I agree, and the discussions I've had with RMS, they're on the same page. An oil leak or a misting, I don't regard that as a safety issue, but yeah, I'm basically with you on all that, Bob.
Thanks, Paul. And Jeff?
Certainly agree that list of critical items are essential. I would say that I think that lighting on the truck, the brake lights, the headlights are fairly essential for its safe operation, even though it can still be brought to a safe halt without them. And the driver also needs to be able to see where it is they're going in order to safely bring it to a halt. So things that interfere with forward vision or side vision are certainly there. With the oil leak, look, I'd ask the question of where's it leaking to? is it leaking onto something hot? Because I believe that's a major cause of engine oil fires, is oil leaks onto hot components. And if it's only a drop a minute, how long before it runs out of oil, and is that within the expected next inspection and oil top-up? But I wouldn't automatically leap to the assumption that a bit of oil around a joint means that the vehicle's unsafe for on-roadworthy.
I think that takes us back to Paul's comments about subjectivity. So we need to know where it is, what it is. You know, something's got to be mighty hot to drip oil onto at atmospheric pressure for it to catch fire. Okay. So going forward, there's lots wrong with the current systems and processes. And I think the best way for us to try and address some of this is to have a look at some of the history of some of the defects that have been issued and see how we can move forward by considering those past experiences. I recently had a New South Wales operator call me, and he wasn't a happy Vegemite, let me tell you. We've been defected in Victoria. All the information was entered onto a tablet on a Monday. The tablet was not uploaded or downloaded, whatever way you want to use the terminology, until the following Monday. The operator received the hard copy the following Friday that had 3 days to clear a defect that was already 11 days old. You know, I'm sure now if you listen carefully, you can hear Samuel Finley Breeze Morse of Morse code fame laughing. 180 years of progress for technology to do this to us. Technology is not working on the front, so who's really responsible? You know, in this case, the driver didn't tell the owner of the vehicle. That's probably one failing, but if he didn't get the defect as a hard copy, that was probably the last thing on his mind at the time. So I'm going to go to you first, Jeff, and ask you, how can we fix this sort of issue?
Well, thanks, Bob. This is actually it may not be the same case, but a similar case that was raised with us when we put out our issues paper on vehicle safety last year. That need to have the efficient sharing of information between the regulators, the registration, the operators, the drivers, so that a vehicle's not kept off the road any longer than it needs to be to have a defect rectified. In terms of what can be done to make it faster, well, probably nothing that's in the law, because there's nothing in the law that prevents it being done faster. It's a matter of recognising the need for the systems to better communicate with one another, and for the sharing of information to be faster and more efficient and not held up because a weekend comes in between.
Yeah, well, you know, I find that one pretty difficult to stomach, because with mobile telephones, the networks that we've got, you know, maybe when the intercept was made, they were out of mobile range, but I'm sure they weren't out of mobile range for the next 7 days.
Yeah.
Comments, please, Paul?
Getting back to what we were talking about before, you know, we really do need a central database that the operator can, cloud secure, so they can actually see how the defect, an appeal process and, a disputation process. And really, they've got to contact the company just to say that there has been a defect. That's my only really comments to that one. Like I'm flabbergasted about that it's actually even happened, and it's happened in this day and age. Yeah, so I'm amazed. But I suppose the computer's only as good as who's in front of it, and you've got to find some way around that to take that out of the equation.
Thanks, Paul. A defect for a faded number plate. Maybe a problem for safety cam, but certainly not a safety factor. The quality of number plates these days is becoming more and more questionable. The operator has no choice in where he sources his number plates, so how's it an operator issue? Then there's the process for clearing the defect. Now, I know that this varies from state to state, but in one state, the owner-operator must surrender the faded number plate to get his new plates. Then they need to get the defect cleared by an authorised inspection station. But when the inspection station clears the defect, they can't actually update the system. So then the operator has to take that piece of paper off to the people at Service New South Wales, so you know which state it is. It's just a total waste of time and dollars. How can this be? Paul?
Well, one of my pet hates is the number plate. We've run walking floors for many years, and as you're aware, the walking floor, the product is discharged out the back of the trailer, and the product, we put the number plates right under as far as we can get, but the product does come in contact and it rubs the letters off, and you just need someone that's having a bad day, and they'll pull you over the number plate. And I've taken to painting the number plates to negate this from happening, but in doing so, and breaking the law. So where do you stand with that? Again, it's subjective. Could be an issue for the safety cam. Fair call. Is it going to cause a catastrophic incident? No. So it really gets down to being a little bit more objective in what we're doing. The process of replacing the number plate, I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think in the past we've actually re-registered the vehicle. Is that right, Jim? No? What do we do? Go and fill out a form, and how long does it take for a new number? So if you've got the form, are you cleared? Yeah. So I think if you filled the form out and you've got the piece of paper, I think you're right. And I'm not aware whether we've actually had to take it and actually get it cleared, or whether it's self-cleared. But
well, this incident certainly wasn't a self-clearing one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Jeff, comment?
Look, absolutely. I think you need to have a clear, visible registration plate on your vehicle, not just for safety cam, but to avoid being effectively immune to a whole range of camera recognition and driver recognition things of who was that vehicle, and the ability for speed cameras and the like to enforce it. Certainly, I know in past vehicles fitted with hinged number plates so that they weren't visible by speed cameras or a safety car when they're moving were something of a problem. Whether the defect system is the right way to handle it, I don't see the benefit of having to go through an inspection after the government agency issued you with the replacement number plate. To fix that seems an unnecessary additional layer of activity. But certainly, I'm not familiar with how every state's registration system works, but certainly where I live, it's a request by over the internet, and you need to return your number plates once the new ones have been posted out to you.
So, what about the quality of these number plates? No comments?
The quality of them, I don't know about the quality. I know Victoria has a free replacement scheme if it's poor workmanship on your number plate, but I don't know how common it is that anyone needs to claim on it.
Well, a number plate that's on the front of a truck in normal operation, out in the sun, most of the time, they should last more than 5 or 7 years. A signatory is supposed to give 7 years assurance on his work. Surely we can do better with number plates. So I think that's something that we need to have a good close look at. What about sun visor too shiny? I just can't believe this one. Any comments?
It's unbelievable, unfathomable, and the ridiculousness of it. We shouldn't even be discussing it here. It's beyond belief. But it does happen.
Yeah, subjective fail, a subjective fail, an objective fail.
Completely subjective. A bad day.
I don't recall anything in the standards about how reflective your sun visor is allowed to be.
Somebody was having a bad day.
But at the end of the day, you've been pulled up on the side of the road, and you've got the man with the uniform on. You're not going to argue with him, are you?
No.
You can't argue.
Because if it's not that, it'll be something else.
Well, usually it's the case, yeah.
Okay. EBS plug not plugged into the lead trailer. Now, plugging in EBSs has been a bit of a hot potato over the last probably 18 months, 2 years. But this one was a B-double that was a new lead trailer that was built under ADR 3804, which allowed you to have load proportioning. And if you did that, you had to put a power supply through the trailer. So if it was a lead trailer, so that if it was towing a tag trailer that was fitted with ABS or EBS, it could be powered. This particular vehicle was towing a trailer that wasn't an ABS trailer. It was issued an infringement for not having the EBS plugged in. It had the big sticker as per the ADR, right up beside the plug. So then the owner had to go through the process of trying to contact somebody. I know that he contacted one of the liaison officers, and after much pain, many phone calls, the defect was drawn. But the operator's still been penalised because of the time he spent on the side of the road and then clearing the system. How do we fix this sort of stuff, Jeff?
It's one of the complications of both as new technology comes in and because we have so many different and often barely compatible components in the heavy vehicle fleet. The way that the connections need to be done aren't uniform because the vehicles, the trailers, the prime movers from different manufacturers aren't any more uniform than they need to be, which means there's not a one simple process that fits everything. I can't think of an easy way to get around the fact that one particular trailer may need a different type of connection than another, than having that recorded in an official document that the truck driver's carrying. These are my components, but that doesn't help you terribly much when you're unhitching and rehitching to a new set of trailers in the middle of the night.
No, but there is scope in there if the voltages are different. So if the connectors are not compatible, clearly you can't connect them. Look, yeah. I've just noticed there's a quick comment come in which was relevant to our previous discussion about number plates. I can verify that number plates in New South Wales are of poor quality, but you can claim warranty at Services New South Wales. So there's one for our viewers. I wasn't aware of that, but it's been confirmed by a high-profile workshop manager. So thank you for that. Do you have any comment about the EBS, Paul?
Just it goes back to just the common sense approach. If there's, we don't have a disputation process. We don't have an appeal. If this whole thing could have been sorted out with a phone call.
That's right.
But they just could have let the driver plug the cord in.
Yep.
It confounds me, I take on board, you got a 24-volt system and a 12-volt system, the incompatibility. But, and I don't know whether the trailer might have the 24-volt system on it, a sticker or something. All our trucks with EBS have just got a 12-volt. So I dare say it would be difficult if you're operating a fleet with, the different voltages. But, it's pretty simple, really. Just get an appeal process there so that people can actually put a bit of common sense into it, or get the inspectors trained to educate. The driver's made a simple mistake. Plug it in, say, listen, matey, and that's the end of the story.
Yep.
And save a lot of people getting stressed over nothing.
Yeah, Bob, I wonder if there's a broader question here of the sorts of faults that can be easily and quickly rectified on the spot, like something's not plugged in, then just plug it in, or a bulb's blown, replace the bulb. There's some of these things where, yes, it needs to be fixed, but if it's fixed immediately, or it's a 5-minute fix, whether there's a need to do anything more than that to ensure the vehicle's safe to continue its journey.
And look, I'd like to add, 99 or 999 times out of 1,000, the enforcement people will say, look, they'll help you out. Now, what we find here isn't the norm. I've had, a logbook that hasn't been filled out correctly, and it's been pointed out, and the enforcement officer said, I'm going down to the back of the truck, fix this out before I get back. And again, it's education.
Yes.
So, from what we're finding isn't the norm.
Yeah. Great example of the principle of education.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where we all want to go, is just lift those standards throughout. If someone's getting it wrong, help them to get it right.
Yeah. And this disputation thing as well. You're going to be able to find out if you do have someone that has a bit of a bee in his bonnet about a transport operator or a driver, and perhaps these issues can be sorted, and you can actually perhaps give these people a little bit of training and a bit of talking to try and straighten them out a little bit.
Okay, the last one I've got on my list here is speed limiting, an ADR 65. And Paul raised this in his introductory presentation. But, the problem with ADR 65 is that there's a lot of focus on 11R tyres in the speed limiting equation. Not all tyres on the driver trucks are 11Rs by a long shot. And the other problem is that if the speed limiter is set to a lesser number than the number that's quoted in the ADRs, then the truck will actually be slower. But for some reason, we have officers around the country, and one particular police officer in South Australia who thinks that the number is the number and that there's no flexibility in it. Now, what happens is that one particular truck had the 11R tyre set at 311. The ADR says 315. The truck was defected and given 24 hours off the road. It goes round the cycle. He gets a $745 fine per cycle. The people who are doing the speed limiter calibration say that it's okay. So it goes back out on the road and the vicious circle starts all over again. And then there's the issue of if it's set up in imperial rather than metric, which is basically the flick of a switch, 315 revs per kilometre equates to 507 revs per mile. The speed limiter should be set then at or below 62 miles per hour, and we should get on with life. But people don't understand this. How do we fix this problem, gents? Paul?
Well, my colleague that has the problem, he's had to go through his entire fleet of trucks, and they're all now speed limited to 99 kilometres an hour. We all know when a truck comes out of the factory, you'll do 102. When the tyres, when you've taken that 18 to 20 mils off the tyre, you'll be doing your 100. So he's actually had to break the law and get all his trucks back to 99 with new tyres on. They'll probably only be doing 96 or 97 kilometres an hour, when they're worn down. Interestingly enough, I understand the New South Wales law is different in as much as the truck 100.1 kilometres an hour to 104.9. There's no fine. There's nothing given at all. Over that, they're grounded or whatever. I'm not quite sure what the process is, but I would have thought that would be the common sense approach to this, and surely the people in South Australia should be able to do the same. And ultimately, when we become one country instead of 7 states, this issue will be sorted. So my mate, he's had to redo all his trucks, and hopefully there'll be some common sense to this, and he can get back to doing his 100Ks.
Jeff?
It sounds like it's just a straight out error of fact. I mean, the standards say that you have to be speed limited, so you don't exceed 100, and there's a tolerance on that. And if it comes out of the factory with whatever number of tyre revolutions, it should be as simple as saying, for this vehicle and this gearbox with these tyres, that or a lower number is the one you're going to see. Now, how we get that information out everywhere, short of printing it on the inside of the cab, the way they do with the tyre pressure placard, I'm not entirely sure. But it's the outcome, not the internal settings that are required to get to the outcome that are at issue here. And certainly, this has been around as long as engine readers have been around. I certainly know of one operator some years ago who reset all their trucks to a maximum speed of 90 and was found them getting defected because the engine reader wasn't showing up the number that they expected to be seeing. But perfectly legal because it was set to less than the 100 kilometre speed that the standard required.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, before we go on to look at some of the questions that have come in on the chat, we need to try and identify some outcomes from this session. And some of the notes that I've made here, there would seem to be a lot of benefit in training workshop personnel in responding to and rectifying defects. And our roadside enforcement, we need national entry standards and national retraining. So I'll go to you first, Paul. Have you got anything to add to that list?
Well, probably the central database, and with operators having access to see if what their defects are and if the defects have been cleared. I think that's probably the biggest one. Again, a bit more objectivity with our enforcement people, and again, enforcement people should have a mechanical background if they're going to make objective decisions issuing defects on heavy vehicles.
Thanks, Paul. And Jeff?
Look, for me, the thing that keeps coming up is about the access to the right information. whether it's the operator knowing that their truck's been issued with a defect notice, whether it's the enforcement or regulatory official who knows that this truck is all right with that setting. It's not like other trucks. That need for one source of information that's widely shared and known and facilitates the report of a defect as quickly as possible, get from the side of the road where it happened through to the operator, to the registration database, whatever, to allow it to be cleared, seems to be critical for this to work effectively.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, well, look, we're running close to time, but I'm going to take the liberty of running a few minutes over here because there's quite a number of questions, and we won't get through all of these questions, but what we will do is we will collate the questions over the next week or so, and we'll get these back at least to the originators, and hopefully we'll be able to get them posted up so that everybody can see them. But I'm going to go through and pick some of these out. And I've got a question here from Adam for you, Jeff. Do you agree that the original legislative intent for defect notices, as opposed to the offence created by Section 61 of using a vehicle contrary to vehicle standards, is that they are informative, administrative, as opposed to punitive?
I would say that the legislative intent is always informative, administrative, rather than punitive. The outcome that we want is that people comply, and to comply they need to know what they have to comply with, and if they haven't succeeded they need to know they haven't succeeded so that they can improve compliance. It's the purpose is never just to punish. The outcome we want is all the vehicles on the road are compliant, they're safe, and there's no need for anyone to issue a ticket or a defect notice at all.
Thanks, Jeff. Another one here is a comment from a risk and compliance manager. Love the idea of a central database, cloud-based, that provides real-time info to all enforcement people, both from a knowledge perspective, i.e. application of objective standards, as well as a specific vehicle perspective. Would also help to ensure that operators are fully and quickly informed about vehicle issues. Might even help enforcement people make more informed decisions instead of relying on limited or potentially superseded knowledge. Would either of you like to make a comment on that? It sounds like a lot of logical stuff in there.
Yep, no, agree 100%.
Yep.
Thanks, Bertie.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the areas that is in the regulatory impact statement for the new heavy vehicle national law is around how we get better data sharing and common knowledge between all the various agencies involved in enforcing the law.
Okay, another one here from Ian. Are operators carrying out their own detailed defect checks or relying on inspectors when they are pulled over? Well, I certainly don't know of any who would be relying on the inspectors, but what are we really seeing out there? Do we think that that's a factor?
Well,
Jeff or Paul?
Truck safe operator, we perform a daily vehicle inspection sheet every morning, and we sign off on that. So, do we get under there and check the condition of the S-cams? Well, obviously we don't, but the workshop will do that, and they'll sign off on that. Vehicle's been serviced. So yeah, I would say that there is a vehicle check being done every day anyway.
Yep. Jeff, any history?
I think
on
there's
that?
no doubt. Look, I think there's no doubt that the good operators know that keeping their vehicle maintained and in good operating condition is the most productive way to run the fleet. However, you only have to look at the news reports of the number of incidents of trucks breaking down on urban motorways at rush hour that pop up with regularity to know that not every operator in the country has that level of concern about fixing problems before they happen.
Okay, thank you. And look, there's one more here which I think is worth reviewing. It's from a fleet manager. I understand we can call out the discrepancies and other factors that can highlight the wider variances that exist between inspection and compliance and safety. The real question is what gets done about the operators and drivers who are constantly on the road, who ignore or try to drive with no regard to safety or compliance. I'm not aware of any recent significant, off-roads to operators, but do you have any history on that, Jeff?
Look, I think that's probably a question that's better directed to the heavy vehicle regulator, because I do know that they are working very assiduously at trying to build up the database of high-risk operators and high-risk operations, so that enforcement can be targeted at those that are having problems in operating safely, rather than just randomly assigned across. But I really don't have the details of how they're progressing with that.
Have you heard of anything, Paul?
No, but I believe that if it's the old 80-20 rule, 80% operators are professional and abiding by the rules and operating safe businesses. And if there's 20% that aren't, perhaps we should be devoting 80% of our resources into the 20% and try to get that 80% to become 90%.
Yeah.
My comment.
Yeah. And when we get to 90, we've got to try and move it to 95.
Yeah, and it could be 95 now, but the old 80-20, it's something easy to fall back on. So yeah.
Okay, well, before I wrap up, Jeff, have you got any last comments that you'd like to make?
Look, just really, thanks for inviting me to be involved. It's raised some interesting issues, including on some of the comments that have come through, and certainly be taking those back to feed into the next stage of the review for the new heavy vehicle law. So, thank you everyone for participating and putting in so many comments.
Thanks, Jeff, and for our viewers. One of the comments that Jeff made in the preamble that we did before this session is that he's going to take all of these comments that come in and, where and as appropriate, introduce them into the final summary of the RIS. That's the right words, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, pretty much. We're written submissions closed on Friday, but we're certainly working through the common themes and the issues that come from those, and I'll certainly be including the things that have been raised today as part of that.
Thanks, Jeff. And Paul?
Again, I'd like to thank the ATA for asking me along, and it's been quite an experience being able to put forward the opinions of operators all over Australia. And it's not very often we do get a chance at grassroots level to be able to put our opinions forward. Basically, we're all on the same page. We all want to operate safely, and we want to do the right thing on the road, and we're aware of our responsibilities to the wider community and to other road users. So yeah, it's been good to be able to communicate that as well. Subjectivity, objectivity, 2 words of the day for me. It's something we can all take away from that. And I'd just like to thank everybody that's put in their comments, and and thank you, Bob, for being our chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Well, to our online viewers, I'd like to thank you for participating in this TMC 2020 online session. COVID has certainly, it's really changed the way Australia has operated in the last 12 months. Hopefully we'll be back to our normal TMCs next year. I hope you've all got something to take away. Defects is a big issue. I don't know of any operator who sets out there to not comply with the law. It's a tough business, but it's also a business that we need to do right. So thank you to our viewers, thank you to our panel, and Have a safe day, and there's still more online, and we'll try and get our answers to you as soon as practical and address all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm not having much fun getting this to shut down.
I don't know what to do.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
See you, Paul.
Hey, Bob. Thanks, mate. Bye.
Right, see you, Paul. Bye, Bob. Thanks
Bye.
for that.
I can't get it to turn off.